Okay, so like I said, welcome. This is a What the Future kind of career presentation, but virtually. We're going to be talking primarily about career transitions and job search strategies in our particular climate right now, because I know that that's super relevant for you all as graduating seniors. But again, ask your questions, ask things as they come up, and do not be shy. It's pretty hard to overwhelm me, so just don't be shy about asking those questions. Sam, as questions come up maybe in the chat box, in case I can't see them, will you make sure to call me into it if you see something? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right, so we're gonna cruise on forward. But all right, so we've got the CSU Principles of Community. So I wanted to put this on here again because I told you I was afraid of trolls. Mostly because, you know, this is a digital space. Sometimes we forget that human connection. That's why we're doing this live session. So just know we're hoping to build community through this workshop. And in particular with the Career Center, we really value those principles of inclusion and social justice. As for fun, as a career coach, you should know that I do, outside of work, I do improv comedy and storytelling. So we're gonna try and have some fun, like with some games and polls and things throughout this session, because again, it's pretty stuffy to watch a recording, but most importantly, we really value your identities. And if there's any questions that come up related to that, don't be shy about asking how you present yourself or how your search might be unique. Okay, so with that in mind, we're gonna cruise forward. So this is what we're going to go over today, navigating this uncertain future. Like, what are some things you might want to consider with COVID, or just the economy and what's happening, some career questions and goals. So I love what Megan brought up of like, I'm figuring it out. Like, that's a great career question. Like, what are paths that I could explore? And lastly, you know, again, tips for building a timely job search strategy and resources and action steps. So again, ask questions as we go along. I want to take this at your pace, and we can pause the recording and talk about something completely different if you want to at any point. Okay, so with that in mind, here we go. So as a result of this presentation, here's some things we're hoping you can be able to do. But yes, so I know Sam had one more poll. Sam, are you there? Potentially. Okay, so we might do a poll about just asking about your summer plans to just see where everybody's at with that. It sounds like some folks are at different places, but we're gonna cruise forward to this next slide. I hope folks have seen Frozen 2. It's a pretty spectacular soundtrack, but this is about like what the future, right? There's a lot of things changing right now, and I just want to send out these messages. And again, I'm gonna pause the recording for a moment, just to ask and check in with you all. So something I'm hoping you can think about and hold on to is like, what are times that I had an experience that didn't go the way I expected? That didn't go the way I expected. And what did I learn from that? Like, what are things that I can pull, whether it's a mindset or a resource or just realizing that you know, you all have 100% survival rate of everything you've gone through so far. So I have all of the belief that you can get through this transition, but it doesn't mean that it's easy. And so just as a brief, like couple career development notes, if you're thinking about the landscape of employers right now, we're facing a really uncertain economy. And I know that as graduation nears, that can be really nerve-wracking, right? Like, what's gonna happen? Or like, what's going on? And what should I do to prepare? So I'm just letting you know that employers are actually in the exact same place. They're kind of stunned. They're still figuring out what they're going to do. And no one knows the answers yet. And so that's not to scare you. It's just to let you know that humanizing process of employers are humans too. And if you're wondering, what do I do about that? Just know that the information we get, even as career coaches, or maybe from your mentors, is changing by the hour. Like one piece of well-intentioned advice might be totally different in the next day. So the best way to stay on top of that is, you know, one of the things that we'll talk about later is using your resources and keeping in touch with folks in the industries that you're curious about so that you can be a part of the conversation as it evolves. And that's a scary thing. So you don't have to know how to do all of that. We're going to help coach you through those things. Okay. But yes, it's totally normal to feel grief. It's totally normal. Even in a normal job search, grief sucks and rejection sucks. So just know that that's a normal part of the process. And we're going to talk about some specific things you should keep in mind as you think about an uncertain economy, and how that might impact your job search. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to switch over to Sam, who's going to do a poll about, just to hear about your current plans, and then that will shape the rest of what we're doing for the rest of the session. All right, recording again. So it sounds like folks are still exploring what the heck they want to do. So I'll talk a little bit about that after we do some breakout sessions. So these are some 3 questions that I want you to sit with. Something to keep in mind is I want you to all be able to identify what is that next career transition or step. And we'll talk about how can I manage all these major life decisions at the same time? Like, how do I even start approaching it? But as we go through, since it wasn't effective to have that breakout room, please don't be shy about letting me know some of your questions or needs that are coming up so we can make sure to address them. Okay, so myth busting messages just briefly, because some of this might be on your mind. So finding a job, or even going to grad school is a game, and the game is rigged a little bit. So when we're talking about opportunities, right, not everybody has the same access to opportunities, whether it's because of who they know or who knows them. Maybe it's because of our identities. It's not the same for everybody. But part of learning the game is using your resources like the Career Center, so we can help coach you on what are some of these parts of the game that are at play, and what are tools you can use to manage that process and not lose your humanity in the process. And hopefully, once you get into the workforce, then you can go in and change the rules of the game so that it's more equitable for other people. But overall, right, does anybody feel like they sometimes struggle with their degree and they're like, what value does it have? Or like, I don't have any skills. Like, what can I do as a job? Yeah, okay, I'm seeing some nods. Okay. Yeah, okay, so we're seeing some struggles with like, how do I talk about myself and my skills? That's valid. So you do have something valuable to offer to the world, and your major actually doesn't determine your career. So I actually have a theater major in med school as my fun example. Like, you developing your skill sets and competencies is a lifelong journey. And you get to determine, like, you're in the driver's seat for what those are. And getting exposure to experiences and connections is the best thing that you can do to just find meaning in a career, like a meaningful career, and also, you know, pay the bills, right? Because that's at the end of the day what we're hoping to do with a career. But yeah, so I don't know if any of y'all have been struggling comparing yourselves to others, or maybe to your peers in other industries like healthcare or business or engineering. But it is futile to think about, oh, this person has an internship, because you might not yet, or have this total life plan totally mapped out. That's not relevant, right? Like, each person's journey is valid, and it would be a disservice to pretend like you are in a lesser place just because you don't have all those answers yet. But it is important to take some meaningful steps toward finding clarity of what do I want to do and how do I get there, which is what, again, we hope that we can cover today. Anyway, so we're going to keep cruising, but if for any graduating seniors, this is the first thing that I talk about in an appointment, is getting clear on your priorities, okay, and your timeline with those priorities, right? So if I was like, yes, I want to get a job, okay, that's nice, but like, my rent is due right now, right? So maybe it's prioritizing based on what are my Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so starting with your top needs or questions and when you need to address them, maybe it's starting at the end and working backwards. So Edgar, you mentioned grad school, and a couple folks were like, yeah, do I go to grad school? Like, I don't know. So maybe something to think about is, for grad school, when are those application deadlines, and what's required for those applications, right? What are some things that I would do after grad school that would make sense for me to go right now? Is it because of the shifting economy that I'd go to grad school right now? Or is it, I want to go in a couple years after I make sure it's what I want to do? So maybe starting with that angle of what would I do after grad school and working backwards, and then setting a timeline for yourself about those decisions could be helpful. But Megan, you know, other folks mentioned earlier though, that they're like, but I don't know what I want to do. Okay, so maybe that's the first question of, what do I want to do, and what educational paths are required to get there? And that sounds like a fantastic question before the end of the semester to start exploring. right? So mapping out those big questions and thinking, how can I get to that answer? But again, set those priorities in a timeline. Because grad school was mentioned, I brought that up, but I did want to make sure I address specifically job searching. Is anybody going to be looking for something to pay for rent specifically like in the next couple months? Just so I can make sure it's timely. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so okay, that's good. If you were, no matter what, or if you're starting a job search, I highly recommend you get clear on when it says for search engines, I would start there. So if you're like, I don't know what I want to do, get clear on what location, the job type, and if it's paid or unpaid, and what are some of the keywords that you might want to do. And we can talk about brainstorming those if you're struggling with that. And for yourself, other priorities to think about, right, are like, is my identity welcomed here, right? Or salary, or like, what's my minimum that I need to make in order to pay rent and feed myself? What are some of the job responsibilities I would love or hate? What's the salary I need, and what's the culture like, right? And I think particularly right now, remote work is really popular, and we'll look at Handshake for some political positions that might have come up. And feel free in the chat box to type some of the industries that you want to explore or job titles that you want to explore, and we can talk a little bit more about what that search might look like. Okay, are there any questions about this slide? No? Okay, so if you did nothing else but wrote this down, right? Like if you wrote at the top of a paper, grad school question mark, and worked backwards of what do I need to figure out to make that decision, boo, you will be so much more set up than you were before this session, right? Okay. Also, I don't know about you, but my family tends to get on my case sometimes about what I'm doing with my life, and they like to see plans. So if any of you are experiencing that, I think Mama Bear might appreciate seeing something like that as well. Okay, awesome. And if at any point you get stuck with those questions, please come and talk to us. Literally, Sam and I are here to meet with you, like in appointments, virtually, drop-ins, we've got your back. Okay, so with all that in mind, career tip. So when you're thinking about job searching, particularly during this period, this is kind of how I like to make sure students know how to split up their time. Networking, and normally I ask it, but I think because there's some audio things with this session, I'll just say it. Networking, why do you think we spend 60% of our time networking, right? Social capital, or like the people who know us, is the most valuable thing, right? Like maybe I want to get a haircut and I'll go on Yelp, and Yelp tells me that this hairstylist is great. But if my friend says that her hairstylist is awesome, I'm probably going to go check out that person first, right? So people power is a really essential thing, particularly in political careers, for the record. I'm sure that's not a surprise for any of you, but just something to keep in mind. And if you're like, but how do I network? What do I do? I highly recommend LinkedIn, and there's a whole session on that actually next Wednesday that I can talk about later. Okay, but pay attention to the power of networking. I know Bill Gates, but Bill Gates does not know me. Bill Gates cannot help me in my job search, right? So we're trying to help you learn, like, who's in my corner? Who do I turn to for advice? And start with the people you know, and then build from there. Okay, awesome. So if you think about it, maybe your faculty, some former internship supervisors, or folks that you have connections with at CSU, add all of them on your LinkedIn, or if you don't have one, we'll talk about that. But yeah. So for a job search process in general, the biggest thing that everybody mentioned even before we got on the call is, in a digital environment, it's so hard to structure your time, right? So a job search or a grad school search is a project, and you get to set the timelines for what makes sense to you. But something that a student mentioned the other day that I thought was really helpful is, she's like, I'm doing a job search task each week. Like, I'm doing something. And I was like, okay, boo, like, go get it. Like, you needed that structure, you go get that structure. So do what works for you, but know that you can make this your own project. As a quick fire thing, if you're like, where do I even start? I would say create a resume. If you don't have a resume, get it updated. We have drop-in hours from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday, but we've got your back with that. But once you finish a resume, you would upload it to Handshake and create a LinkedIn. Now, if all that seems overwhelming, again, we have step-by-step resources, and it's one day at a time. So even if you did 2 of those tasks this week, you'd be so far ahead of the game. But like I said, use keywords and make safe searches, so that way you don't have to go onto websites every day if you're actively job searching. And when in doubt, does anybody fear that they're not qualified for anything? Or like, has anybody seen like, To get experience, you need experience? Yeah? Okay, cool. I'm seeing some hands. Good. Okay, yes, Max, thank you. Okay, so to get experience, I need experience. Yeah, that's part of the rigged game, right? Of like, excuse me. So when you see a position description, now granted, if some of you are like, I want to be a CEO, okay, good job. But if you see a position description and you meet 70% of the qualifications, I want you to apply if you're interested in it, okay? Because recruiters are looking for a unicorn when they post a job description. And I want you to set yourself up for as many yeses as possible. Rejection sucks. It's inevitably going to be part of the process, but I want you to give them a chance to tell you no and to keep going. And if at any point that gets exhausting or burned out, again, come in and we can assess your strategy and see what we can do to help you. And most importantly, do not stop applying until you have signed and or started. Different states have different laws. I've talked to a lot of students recently who they had an internship and then it was rescinded. So we're going to talk later about some student legal resources that you can use, because if you have signed a contract, you might have some grounds for negotiation. If it was a verbal offer in certain states, it doesn't matter, but just no matter what, just keep applying until you've signed and started. Okay? Awesome. All righty. So with that in mind, building connections and the job search. I love memes, so you're welcome. But more importantly, how many of you have been on Handshake before? And feel free to put it in the chat, just so I know. If you've been on Handshake before. Yeah, let's see. Me. Yay! Oh, good. Okay, so there's a good group of folks who've probably been on there before. That's awesome. Okay. Handshake is where I tell all students to start their search, because that's where CSU employers who want to hire CSU students and alumni post jobs and internships. And we still have a ton of active postings. So I'm going to change this guy and do a new share. And we're going to take a look at that website. Okay. So let me do that real quick. Okay, so when in doubt, if you're like, where do I even start my search? I don't know. Go to CSU Career Center. It is so easy. Like, we have laid this totally out for you. If you're like, how do I meet with somebody? We've gone virtual. This button takes you directly to making an appointment or quick questions. If you want to do a drop-in, we have this chat box right here that shows you just how to do it. Okay, is everybody seeing the Career Center page right now? Yes, perfect. Okay, good. I just want to make sure that I was showing it correctly. All right, so this is a Career Center page. If you're looking for jobs, where do you think you click? Jobs, right? So clicking on jobs will take you directly to Handshake. Okay, so most of you have been on here. You know how to navigate it. That's awesome. I'm going to click on jobs just because I know that some of you said you were searching actively. So I don't know if y'all have heard of Marie Kondo, but she does The Magic of Tidying Up and does Sparks of Joy on Netflix. And I highly encourage you to reflect on what's been sparking joy for you as you think about some of your classes. Like, what are topics that you've gone into or tasks that meant something to you, because you can actually use some of those as keywords. So I know some students who are interested in social justice. Some of you might be interested in politics or campaigns. But use those keywords and get creative with them, just like if you were finding an article for a paper you had to write for class. Some of you are going to have some restrictions with location. I'm just going to put some of you might be looking for remote work. So I'm just going to put politics, filters, paid roles only, because that's important, especially in politics. Paid roles only. And then I'm going to click see jobs. Ooh, what? Okay. Now it looks like there's some great opportunities in field organizing, a clinical assistant, all this cool stuff. And you can do full-time job, and let's see what happens. 201 jobs, great. And I noticed that there were a lot of remote work opportunities earlier. So if you're like, this is the best search ever, yes, you can click save your search, bam, and it has created a job alert. So now you'll automatically get alerted if you click here if any new opportunities come up under there, so you're not there all the time. Okay. Are there any questions about Handshake? No? Okay. Once you finish your resume, I highly encourage you to upload it to your profile, because if you're using Handshake actively to apply for jobs, employers are way more likely to click on it if you uploaded your resume. And if you upload your resume, you can sync it over and it fills in the content. So it's super easy. Okay, awesome. So fill in your profile, use saved searches, and get creative with those key terms. And then, as I mentioned, so other searches that might be relevant for you all in particular is usajobs.gov. You might be a little familiar with that website. It's a great filter. Or some of you mentioned wanting remote work. Flexjobs.com is an incredible resource. I love that website. It filters really well, but it has all sorts of remote work opportunities that they're hiring right now. So I highly encourage that. Again, I will send you a link afterwards to the webinar series that I'm doing on Wednesdays about networking and job searching in general, so that you can get an in-depth look at how to use LinkedIn. But this is where a link to CSU alumni on LinkedIn, so you can just see who the heck is there. Okay. When you connect with people in your current community or strangers that you want to get to know better, you're like, what is it like to be a campaign manager? I don't know. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to go be a social media manager. Okay, boo, go do that. But informational interviews are a way to reach out to strangers and say, hi, tell me your story. So again, I will walk through some of those resources later, but another way to network at the end of the semester or at the end of April, we're going to, yes, at the end of April, we're going to do a virtual job fair. So that'll be really cool and some great opportunities to connect with employers there as well. Okay, if there's any questions, put them in the chat box. I'm gonna keep cruising. I know I'm just like talking your ear off. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Marie Kondo. For those of you who are already actively searching, I highly encourage you to stay organized, right? So if you're like, I don't know how many positions I applied to, or what source I had, or how far I got in the process, it's hard to be more strategic. So this is a basic job application tracker. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and it's super helpful to stay organized. Whenever you apply to something, just put something in there. Yes. Ooh, good. Got a question. Ooh, you've done one of them. Max, was it helpful for you? I love it. Okay, I'll let you keep typing that. But yes, I'm glad that it's been helpful, or that you've done one of these, because especially if you're using multiple sites, it can get really disorganized really quickly. And if you come in and you're like, Kelsey, I'm not getting a job and I don't know why, it's a lot easier if I can say, yeah, it is a lot. It's such a visual of the rejections you have, which is super frustrating. And so that's why I like to color code it and come up with different ways to like thank myself for setting myself up for a yes, but it still sucks. Absolutely. So again, if you're finding that you're only getting to the interview stage but not getting past it, then boo, let's talk about your interview strategy, right? Versus maybe you're applying for too high of a position, or there's so many ifs. Okay, so I promise this is the last cool meme I have. But again, if you are wondering about interviews, or if you're getting to that stage and getting stuck, we have plenty of resources on the Career Center website page, but I also encourage you to check out Big Interview. Have any of you used Big Interview? And I'll let you talk in the chat, but if you have, say yes. But Big Interview is a great resource because there's going to be so many more virtual interviews that's in this environment, right? So getting comfortable with that and practicing it. There's a woman named, I call her Janet on Big Interview. She's like a pre-recorded lady, and you can tell her what questions to ask you, and then you practice responding, and you can watch the video yourself. So it's awesome. And we also have mock interviews for drop-ins, and Sam does those all the time. Okay, great. Okay, so like I said, if you're like, but all this stuff was a lot, or like, I want to dive into one aspect of it, that's great. We are wide open. Like, students are still getting a little shy about meeting with us virtually, but we have drop-in appointments Monday through Friday from 10 to 2, and appointments with Sam or me on Zoom or phone, whatever is more convenient for you. And you can easily do any of these topics, or just like what am I doing with my life? And that's totally fine. We've got your back, okay? But the easiest way to do it is just to go to our website. It has all the information on there, but if anything else comes up, don't be shy about asking questions. Okay. Some additional resources I just wanted to make sure I give a shout out to. Career Center newsletters. So these are getting revamped, and I'm really excited about it because there's specific things that CLA students need that College of Engineering doesn't need. So we're adding new resources and tips in there, but they come out weekly. So if you're getting them in your spam folder, please check them. every week they have new job postings under those filters. We also have our online resource center. If any of you are worried about your apartment lease and like, can I get out of it? I don't know if I can pay rent, or if you have a job contract that was renegotiated, you can actually get in touch with CSU Student Legal Services, and they're coaching students right now on all of those things. So please utilize those resources. If you're having any trouble in your classes with accessibility, the Disability Center website is phenomenal. They have a great form for reporting that if you need extra support. Tilt has some academic success pieces. Rams Against Hunger is fantastic because they're ramping up their initiatives. If any of you are LGBTQ or have a friend who is LGBTQ and now they have to quarantine in a non-affirmative environment, this is a great article about that, and I'm happy to send it afterwards. And again, if any of you also know about someone who might be in a domestic violence situation or have any other significant needs, the Women and Gender Advocacy Center still has their hotline 24/7. Okay. And if there's anything I didn't mention or that you have questions about, I encourage you to send me a private chat or email afterwards. But these are all resources, and CSU is still here for you. Okay. So my last piece, I promise, I had to talk at you a lot. This is way more than I expected. But yes, so action planning. It's really easy to say you're going to do a lot of things, or it gets really overwhelming, especially you're probably getting a lot of emails from faculty. But I want you all to write down what is one thing that you will do for your career development by Sunday. And I'm going to pause the recording